Hello and welcome to the daily drawing. Today we're going to be drawing a betta fish. There's a lot of different types of bettas. I'm not sure what the name of this type of betta is. If you're a fish person, you know, let me know because that would be cool because I love learning new things. All right, so to start with, we're going to start with the top of the spine just to make it easy for us to understand the flow of the body. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with that curve. It's basically kind of like a big long parenthesis, or you can think of it as like a backwards C or something like that. So to get started with, I'm going to draw, just kind of like start with a parenthesis shape, kind of like this, and then continue carrying on that parenthesis for a good distance, and then you want to frown it down. Okay, so parenthesis, carry it on kind of like a diagonal line almost, and then add a slight frown to the end of the line. That way we get this really nice kind of swoop, and that'll represent the spine following down to the face area. All right, now fish have really unique faces. I love fish faces now. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're here at the tip of the face here. So we're gonna come back and do those lips and stuff later. We're gonna do the curve down for the bottom of the head. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna drop this down. We're gonna leave this pointy, we'll come back and fix this. You can make it slightly rounded so it's not so awkward. We're gonna start off with a smile, like this. We want to keep the body fairly thick-ish, not too thick though, because they're kind of skinny. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to curve it and then connect it back up to this part right here. So what I'm going to do, if you want to, you can start at the top and then curve it. That way you don't lose track of where you're at. And then your goal is to kind of meet them in the middle here. So it's kind of like it starts off thicker and then it slowly gets thinner as it gets further back towards the spine. Once you have reached the spine area, then what we're going to do is just going to very lightly draw a smile at the end here. This is where we're going to have the tail come out of later, and then we're just going to draw a frown until it touches back on the body. Now this looks a little awkward, but this is where the body is overlapping itself, and so that's why it gets that kind of a curved look to it. All right, and this will make a little bit more sense once we add that top fin. All right, so we're going to focus on the face first, and then we're going to do the fins and stuff last. So for the face, the first thing I would suggest doing is let's go ahead and do the mouth. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw a slight diagonal line like this. I'm going to draw the crease in the mouth first. So on the top of the head right here is where I'm going to start. I'm going to draw a slight frown coming down like this. And it's good to go out of the body just a little bit, just to give it a little bit more of a curved definition like this. Now, this looks really awkward because we have to do the upper lip as well. So what I would suggest doing is go ahead and erase above that line. I would just do that little curve right there just so that we have a slight indentation so that that's not perfectly even right there. All right, so now that we have kind of like the pucker of the lips, if you want to draw kind of like an outline around it, kind of like you can see on this fish, you can kind of very lightly draw like a lip line if you want to. If you want to leave that part off, that's up to you. It's kind of how you want to design your fish. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna do this far off eye first. We can see their eyes bulge out just slightly. So we can see right above the lip, there's a tiny gap, and then we can see a little bump. That's actually the edge of their eye. So I'm gonna go from the top of the lip area, make a tiny gap. So I'm just gonna make a slight bump right here. Make sure it's not too big, otherwise your eye is gonna look kind of a little scary. So just a very slight vague bump right there so that we have the look of the eye. Once we have the eye bump, then what we're going to do is we're going to actually go kind of diagonal away from that bump, like this on both sides, very lightly because we're going to erase this. And then we're also going to go a diagonal away from the head. So that tells us that right here is going to be about where we're going to have our other eye, so that it's going to be the same size as this one, and it's also a diagonal away from the mouth. So that once you're done with that, you can go ahead and erase the lines so that they're not visible. Now, notice that we have it really close to the mouth. You don't want to end up with the eye like way over here because that's going to look super awkward. So be careful not to make the face too far back. Otherwise, you kind of lose the illusion of it turning, which would be kind of weird. All right, once you have the eye shape drawn, then what I would suggest doing is draw a secondary shape on the inside, and that's where you're going to have like the pupil and the highlight. And then this inner part right here would be kind of like the colory area of sorts where the fish's like iris color would go. Okay, once you have the eye complete and you're satisfied with the look of it, then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the gills. So if I'm looking at the location of the gills are kind of lining up with wherever that tail is coming down from. Now, yours may not line up perfect, and that's okay. But for me, I'm just going to drop this down, and this is going to tell me that this is about where I'm going to be putting my gills, so somewhere in this area. So if it doesn't look right to you, just a good measurement is if I take the measurement of this eye and go over, the gills should be about 1.5 eyes over. So if I go like this is one eye, and I should go over at least maybe like half an eye or a second eye over, so that the gill, which is going to be just a parenthesis, is going to be about 1.5 eyes over. So if I take that measurement, it should be about 1.5 or 2 over. Don't go like super far down the body, otherwise it gets a little bit awkward, okay? All right, now after you do the gill, if you look here, you can see that the fin comes right below the gill is where we're going to have that first fin come out of. Now to draw this fin shape, what we're going to do is we're going to start on the gill itself. We're going to draw a smile coming up like this, and then we're going to draw a diagonal line going out like this. Once you have that shape drawn, what I would suggest doing is draw a kind of like a wiggly line on the top, like this. All I'm doing is I'm doing a combination of frowny faces and smiley faces. And then I see that, I don't know if it has like multiple fins or if this is a different fin than this fin. It might be. I'm not sure. It's a little confusing. But I'm going to separate these. See how this is kind of clear and then it bends back into that part? I'm going to keep that separate from this red part here just in case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a frown to kind of connect that back into that same spot that I came out of earlier. And then I'm going to erase the body on the inside. You can leave the body on the inside if you want to, because these are kind of transparent, but that's kind of up to you. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, just every now and then, I'm going to draw a frown, kind of connecting it back down, just give it a little bit of texture, because texture would look pretty cool in this particular fish. All right, so now that I have that, I can see that I have this kind of fin-ish thing coming out, and then I have kind of a zigzag pattern for this part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first draw another line coming out with a frown, like this, for that thin fin. And then for the other part, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start on this fin a little bit below, and then I'm going to draw a zigzag pattern like this. And then I'm going to draw lines coming back in once again. So that way, you notice that there's a slight difference in texture between these two fins. That just adds a little bit of variety, and variety looks really cool sometimes in artwork. All right, so the last thing I'm going to add is I see that there are 2-ish curved fins. I don't know what that is. We're going to go ahead and just draw a bump there. So to get this fin illusion, because it is curved, I'm going to start on this one. I'm going to do a big parenthesis. I'm going to curve it back in and then touch on the actual line like this. I'm going to drop it down and then curve it back into the body. This is a great way to create a folded fin. So this right here would be the inside and this right here would be the outside, so it looks like it's folding over itself. Then I have that weird little bump here, and then I have another little fin thing coming here. So you just draw wherever you see the indications of the fins themselves. All right, so for this particular picture, we don't really see the fins on the back side over here. It's all smooth. We see a lot of fin going in this direction though. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into 3 parts. We have the dorsal fin, we've got the fin, and then we got whatever that fin back there is. I have no idea. It's just a complicated fish. All right, so I'm going to start with this fin up here. So we're going to do, if you notice, this is on the top of the spine here, in between these 2 areas. So I'm going to put a little marker dot right here. This is where I'm going to start my fin in between these 2. I would suggest erase the curve behind that dot so that it makes it easier to do this next step. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a really thin line going up like this. And you can add a little bit of a wonk or you can make it straight. It's up to you. And then I'm just going to draw a very thin parallel line going back down to the dot. That's going to be my first, see that blue line? That's what that's going to be. All right, now to get this texture going back here, I'm going to add some zigzags, and then I'm going to add some smiles, and then I'm going to add some like more zigzags. So kind of add variations of zigs and zags and smiles, okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add like little smiles. I'm going to add some zigzags. Be careful not to make them too perfect. Allow them to have some curves to them. And then you're just going to add a huge variety of them all the way until you get across from the bottom of the tail like this. So you want to aim for going across from the bottom of the tail. And then what I would suggest doing is on the back of the body, start back here. And then we're just going to add long spikes like this. Just a few of them, maybe like 2, 3, maybe even 4 if you want to. start aiming them towards the top of that fin that you just drew, and then try to connect them together. After you get to this point, what your goal is you want to draw all the lines that are going to be coming down from here, aiming it towards the spine of the fish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up here, just because this will be easiest. I'm going to draw some lines, curving downwards. And they can be straight, they can be curvy, they can be wavy, but notice that I'm trying to aim them towards the spine. Now, be careful not to fill in all of your spaces. You want to leave some space for the other parts of the fin. So I'm going to add some curves going in this direction. It's okay to have some overlap too. Overlap looks pretty cool. That way I have some nice different definitions going on in this fish. And if you want to, you can erase the inside of the body that is being overlapped by these fins. All right, so that would be my dorsal fin. Now for my tail fin, I'm going to scoot this over. All right, should we do the tail fin first, or does this one first? Usually what I do is I try to draw whatever's in front. Okay, yeah, so the tail fin is in front of whatever this fin is. So I'm going to do the tail fin first. What I would suggest doing is just do like a big poofy kind of line going all the way, and then it actually touches on the mouth is how far over it goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very lightly sketch just a big curve so that I know how big I want my fin to be. So I want my fin to be about that big, which I think would be pretty good compositionally. So after I have the length of the fin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to then go a little bit darker. I'm just going to draw a bunch of kind of wavy, wiggly lines. The more random and uneven you make this step, the more flowy the fin is going to appear to be. All right, once you have completed the flowy lines, you'll notice right here is where it's connecting back to the tail. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start on the tail part right here. Then I'm just going to draw a little bit of a frown to connect it to the top of the head. It seems kind of weird, but that's just the illusion that this fish's tail is making because it's curving its body. All right, now comes the fun part, is you're going to add a variety of thicknesses of lines going towards the tail. What I would suggest, draw the thicker ones first and then fill it in with the thinner ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start on the tail. I'm going to draw a curved line coming down, and then I'm going to bring a curved line coming back, but make it get from thin to thicker. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to jump under these things and then curve it up in an upwards parenthesis, or in a smiley face if you would rather. Curve it back. I'm going to add one more right here that's going to go relatively straight like this. I call these the setup lines. This will make it easier to figure out what direction the tail lines are going to have to go. So all of the ones in this part, I usually just start on the corner of a ruffle, and then I'm just going to curve it back in. Then you can add a couple more in there if you want to. So all of them should still flow in the same direction as these. This one I'm going to have to divide it in half first, and then these ones are still going to fold down. They're going to slowly start getting straighter though. These ones right here are going to fold up a little bit, and then they're slowly going to start getting straighter again. So that kind of makes it look like it goes with the flow of the direction that the fin is going. And of course, you can kind of slightly warp it. You can add some more dramatic curves like this if you want to, just to give it a little bit of a different spice to the tail and make it look like it's folding on itself. But for the most part, they're going to curve in the direction that those main tail lines that we just drew are curving. Be careful not to do this too much. Notice that I accidentally overlapped my line a little bit. A couple times, it's not that bad, but if you do it too much, it's going to look very scribbly and messy, and it's going to be hard to read the direction of your fin. Now, this part right here is going to be a little bit more complicated because you got to be careful not to draw over the other fin. You want to jump underneath that fin, so be really careful on this part not to cover those fins that are going over. If you do, just erase it and you're good. All right, so now before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and erase my circle-y thing for my tail. I would just probably do that before you do all these lines, might make it easier, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm actually almost done. That was really fast. All right, so the last thing I have is I have this weird tail thing that I don't know where it's going, but it starts down here, and what it's doing is it's making a smooth line like this, and then we're seeing some of that wiggle texture, and it goes wiggly all the way up until it touches on the tail. Now, the texture part on this one's going to be pretty fun because it's kind of going with the flow of the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to draw curves going kind of away from the body. Almost looks like the fish has a really weird beard, but we're just going to let it. So we're just going to draw a bunch of lines curving away from the body like this. And then this is very important. Okay, so this little area right here is critical. Okay, so this tail is on top of this part, but the direction these fin lines are going are sideways and these are going slightly down. So I really want to make sure that whenever I draw these fin lines, they're not going in the same direction as these fin lines. So they can still kind of point down a little bit, but be careful not to let them point in the same exact direction as the other one. So you really want to be able to tell the difference between these fins and those fins. All right, so we're pretty much done with the drawing of the fish. The rest of this is mostly going to be texture and shading. All right, so you can add a bunch of scales in your picture if you want to. I personally like the look of a smoother texture for the fish, so I'm just going to keep only some scales. So I'm going to add the scales that go on the back of the gills, and I'm just doing little C shapes like this, or like little parentheses. You can do like little frownies or smileys. I'm just going to add a couple of these. Usually I do 2 layers and then add a couple spaced out away from it, just to kind of help emphasize that this was in fact scales. Maybe do a couple around the lips, just to indicate that there were some scales there, and then maybe a couple back here behind the curve of the body, so that we know that that's not part of the tail back here, or not part of the fin anyway. You can add a few in the parts that are a little bit more shaded, just to help emphasize some more scaly textures. I personally don't like to go overboard on the scales, just to keep it less busy, but that's kind of up to you how much scale you want and how smooth that you want it. You can even cover the entire body in scales if you want to. Entirely up to you how you want to go about that. Last thing I would do before I call the drawing quits is erasing the back edge of the tail like this, and allowing those lines just to naturally stop somewhere in the body, kind of in their own position. So like you can have it stop like in the middle of the tail area, or you can have it stop a little bit below. That way it flows a little bit more nicely into the area where we have the tail. All right, so there's the drawing part. If you want to add more detail, definitely feel free to. I'm going to add a little bit of shading, especially on this one with how many overlapping fins we have. The shading will really make it pop. You can also add color. Oh, there's so many different really pretty colors for betta fish. So I used to have a pet betta fish. I'm very bad at keeping fish. I think the longest fish I ever had was not a fish. It was like a tadpole, and it stayed a tadpole for like 2 years. I don't know how tadpoles can stay tadpoles for that long. But yeah, so it only lasted like a month though whenever it turned into a frog, and I was so sad because I actually got like really attached to that tadpole. His name was The Thing because I didn't know what he was at first. I won him at a carnival I went to at my local town or whatever, and so it was kind of weird. But anyway, yeah, so they were like, we'll just throw him out. I was like, no, don't throw out The Thing. He's super cool. So I kept him, and he stayed alive for a while. But anyway, that's weird personal stuff. Anyway, yeah, so I really like fish. They look really cool, especially like betta fish's colors are really pretty. So if you've ever had a betta fish and you would like to color it to match your betta fish, or if you want to make the feathers, the tail fins is the word I was looking for, a little bit longer or flowier, however long or flowy you need it to match your fish, feel free to do that. So, and you can even make it a fantasy fish. It can have feathers on it if you want to. All right, so here I have my scales and stuff are kind of a little bit lost in the shading, so I might want to go back and add some more scales later, but I actually kind of like how it looks nice and smooth. Here, because I've added some darker shading in those fins that are underneath it, it has really brought the fins that are on top out a lot more, which is what I was really wanting to go for. And that's really helpful when shading a piece, is to really try to emphasize the parts that are behind and the parts that are in front. And I'm just holding my pencil as I usually do when I shade, just so that it's a little bit easier to shade. And I usually shade in this direction just because that's more natural for me. You can shade it back and forth or crosshatch if you want to. That's just how I personally like to shade. All right, so I'm going to call that quits. You can add some details like bubbles and stuff, but I really like how it turned out. I hope you guys had fun. All right, have a good day. Bye.